Dana Grubb, 2420 Henderson Place. I worked in the Community Development Block Grant Program for a long, long time. First in housing rehab for 8 years, and then I ran the program for 16 years. It's disappointing, first of all, to hear that the agreement is not coming in until August, when it used to come in January and February. It's also disappointing that over time, the amount of money that the federal government allocates for CDBG and home has basically remained stagnant, and the number of communities that qualify for the use of the money has increased. So the pie has remained the same, and there are more people showing up to get a piece. Statutory requirements: you must benefit low and moderate income clientele, eliminate blight or urgent need. And urgent need is an area where you generally don't want to go, because that means you've had an earthquake, a tornado, or some major event. Some observations after reviewing this. And I have it's no reflection or disrespect to any of the organizations, but for many years, City Council had a moratorium on funding nonprofits. And there was a reason they had that moratorium. And after looking at this and seeing the kind of demand that seems to have increased over time, they didn't want to fund nonprofits and get into that habit because there was United Way and there were private contributions. And because of the fluctuation in the amount of entitlement over many years, they did not want organizations to suffer the consequences. So for at least 20, probably longer, City Council would not fund nonprofit organizations. At a certain point in the 1990s, they decided, well, maybe we'll do bricks and mortar. If a heating system goes down, if the roof fails on a nonprofit's facility, we'll fund that, but they've got to match it for dollar. The volume and the amounts requested, and the fact that the CDBG allocation has shrunk probably 1.2 million since its peak year when I was managing the program, puts a lot of pressure on the use of this money. The second point I wanted to make, and I think the moratorium was a wise move by City Council at that time. The second issue I wanted to address was housing rehab, since I worked in that program as a finance specialist for 8 years. Northside 2027 initiative is a focused, targeted program to a portion of the city that actually was targeted when I was in housing rehab in the 1980s. And the money that's being allocated to housing rehab, I think there's some things that need to be considered. A, you can target areas in the city. You don't have to do a citywide program, or you can mix it up. You can make it available in different sections of the city and target a specific area. I think with the Northside 2027 program, it's something to be considered because you want to have an impact. You don't have to allocate all of it, but you could target a portion of it to that section of the city. One of the things that councils demanded every year when I was in that program and when I was a grants administrator was an annual performance report on housing rehab. How many cases settled, how many grants issued, how many loans issued, where those were issued, north side, west side, south side, so the council could determine whether the performance of the program equaled the commitment of funding. It's food for thought. Streets. We focused on streets. We overlaid a lot of streets. We rebuilt streets with CDBG over the years. There's very little committed to public infrastructure in Bethlehem anymore, and given the condition of the streets in this city, that's a major failure. There's no targeting of playgrounds or parks, what work is going to be done. It's just kind of an open-ended request. And the Bethlehem Co-op, while I think it's a wonderful idea, I've heard nobody discuss how it's going to benefit low and moderate income residents. And I think there's also an issue when almost every elected official who's going to be voting on this is a member. You're heading down a slippery slope, and I just wanted to put that out there. When you have an investment in something, a financial investment, and you're voting on public dollars to go into that, you want to be careful, because I've heard from a number of people myself who have expressed those concerns. So just food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone